All right, welcome. So here I want to show an example of a synthesis, the way I would require you to do. And this is due in week 8, I believe. But over the next 2 weeks, you will be reading several papers and summarizing as we've done in the past. I have uploaded a template for this. Notice that this is a little bit different from the template for summarizing papers. In that one, you were required to give a lot more detail about the authors um, and all of that. But here, we're going to go straight to the point, and the summary of those articles are still due separately. So there's going to be three separate summaries of primary scholarly papers, but those three summaries will not feed into this one final synthesis table. And this is what is due in week 8. The three summaries are due again over the next 2 weeks. So we have read together several papers. The Rodriguez paper, we so I read that paper. But the Hallman paper we discussed as a group. That's a qualitative study using photo voice. The Spinelli paper we also discussed as a group, which is the one that looked at GIS information. And finally, we discussed this as well as a group, the Ashraf paper. So, in your summary, what is the methodology? So, we've discussed what that is now. So, this one used, it's quantitative. It used a retrospective electronic health records data. And again, so same thing. You describe this, you describe that. So, those are the four papers that I included in this summary. And for each of those, what is the population? Well, this one was about 18,000 people um, from records across several places, a lot of them from the Midwest. This one was a paper qualitative from Ireland. This one here was patients without a prescription um, for GLP-1 receptor agonist. And so who had a prescription for it actually, but did not have an ICD code for type 2 diabetes. So this is a real large study. 38% of over 3 million patients fit into that criteria. And then this one paper looked at online pharmacies. So again, you can follow the different rows on the table. And if I put something in bold, it's because I'm beginning to see a trend that compares in at least two of the papers that I included. Okay, so that's a common trend there. I can also see a trend in study type. So this one here was a retrospective cohort study. This one again, the same thing using electronic health data, and the other two are qualitative. Duration of studies, actually, here they are similar, for example. So you begin to look for commonalities or even stark differences in the papers that you have read. Now, this is important to state what the dependent variable in the paper is, okay? Because ultimately most papers are centered around the dependent variable, and you have to be able to know what that is. So in this one paper, they're looking at two different GLP-1 receptor agonists and how they might affect medical physical changes, weight and things like that. This one is qualitative, looked at stigma. This one here is looking at the population level, where are people taking off-label prescriptions the most by county across the United States. And this one is asking if a common source of these meds, that is online pharmacies, whether they are legitimate and whether they do deliver good products. And so here I want to point out that in results, so you could have up to three sets of results. So here I want to say that please, every paper has tons of results. Focus only on the results that are relevant to your idea in the paper and read it vertically. By that I mean read the introduction method, particularly focus on the one about what you're interested in. Go to the method section, read the method section that described how that variable or that factor that you are interested in was assessed, and then go to the results and look at the results for that variable and find the discussion. So that way, you understand that variable quite well in that paper. Now, are there other variables? Yes. Are there other things? Yes. You will still read the paper horizontally, that is from start to finish. Um, you could speed read it in my own, and that's acceptable. But for the variable you are focusing on, read that in depth. Reflect on it. Try to really understand it and state that in your words, because that's really where your own intellectual creativity comes to play. And so another thing is in when I talk about results, and this is also important for your summaries, please quote results from and interpret results from the results section of a paper. Do not quote, you know, uh, like a text quote from the abstract, which some people might do, but you are limiting yourself to the interpretation of the authors if you quote their own interpretation either in the abstracts or in the discussion. Go to the results section and quote data. So, for example, here I am saying, oh, look at figure two. This shows a Kaplan-Meier curve, and this is what it shows, and this is what it compared. 65% versus 40% respectively. So that's data right there, quantitative data. What is qualitative data? Look at quotes that are consistent with what you are trying to say. So under this category of participants' experience, they said that they experienced overt and covert external judgmental comments. Now, this is one comment from a weight loss coach. So that is judgmental because it's saying you are just not doing enough. So that's data in qualitative papers. And again, here, another one here talking about this particular paper had a lot of different figures, but again, I'm focusing on which cluster is most predictive of high Ozempic use. So I had to look at which ones had the highest use. This was in table one. And what are some of the attributes of those people that tend to use off-label, of those counties that have the highest proportion of people that take these meds. And so there were 82.6% white versus 88% in counties with the least prescription rates, meaning that the wealthier um, the wealthier counties tend to have a high prescription rate, and so on and so forth. And so this one here again describe data directly from the paper. So again, notice that I'm saying exactly where I'm getting the data from. Table one, here's table one. So that was results one. And then other results that are important. So this one, for example, I'm just going to pick on this one, is important to me because again, I am focusing on where, uh, where to, where to do a health campaign or even market Ozempic, assuming I want to start an online pharmacy, an online business selling Ozempic. So cluster six had the highest rates, and cluster three had the lowest, 52% and 31%. But I noticed that there are two clusters that are really interesting. So these are high urban centers because business or health campaigns kind of work are more impactful overall where there are a lot of people. And those places have, for example, is 49% white, so relatively um, diverse, very diverse. Medium income is about 80%, $80,000. And then there's county cluster four, which is, a large number of counties that has that is 73% white and has a high income. Okay. So that's that. And then I go on to my overall reflection for each of these papers. And I'll focus on the same last one I just looked at. So um, the method that was used was really good because it helps us to understand where these meds are being used, and they found clusters in high density urban areas. That's not surprising. These areas typically have low SVI, low social vulnerability index. They are suburban or suburban areas, particularly, and that's cluster four. And so when I likened, so this is my reflection with the class, that I liken this to the wealthy neighborhoods like in East Grand Rapids, who have low social vulnerability index and is typically high income. And then there's another swath of high prescription rates in the South, but this coincides with an area of high Ozempic use, and this area is 58%. I was going to say 50% white, and it has a very low household income and a high SVI. So overall, this tells me that the use of these meds actually is quite broad, but there are certain niches that, if one is interested, can focus awareness campaigns or enlightenment campaigns, or even my side gig, my side hustle, selling Ozempic on the internet. So these might be places I might want to target. And then I do a synthesis, and some important things to note here is at the end of that synthesis, I'll state my next steps. So now that you've read these papers, what's next? Or so what? And notice that I only included four papers in this summary, um, but there are papers I also read that were not considered, either because they were shoddily done or because they did not really give any valuable information. So we shouldn't just put every single paper we read because I don't want to read another paper. What if a paper is substandard? What if the authors are really not authorities in that subject? So you wouldn't want to use that as the basis for your argument. And finally, please state the references in APA format as you can see here. All right, well, thank you.